Hello, good evening. Am I audible? Hello, hello. Am I audible or not? Okay. Good evening. Good evening. Uh, in this lecture, we are going to conclude the Victorian period. We have already dealt with Charles Dickens, then William Macy's Thackeray, uh, Bronte, three Bronte sisters, and other writers who are minor writers. One of the important and the last Victorian is considered, that is Thomas Hardy. In fact, Hardy is considered as one of the important figure of this period who started its career as a poet. And what happens that later on he turned to be, he started his career as a novelist, and later on he turned to be poet because one of his novel, Jude the Obscure, which was you can say the copy of Jude the Obscure, was burned by the students of Oxford University, and that is how you have this writer who turns to poetry. Of course, he is famous for his novels. He is one of the writers who is considered as the writer of pessimism, because in most of his novel you will find this element of pessimism, and sometimes you will find the ironic tone. uh, he was born in Dorset, and you can say that most of his novels are set in Wessex, where he was actually born. And this is why he is considered as one of the regional writer who talks about the setting, that is basics, in his most novels. And what happens that he himself called his finest novels as a novel of character and environment. His emphasis on impersonal and negative power of threat over working class people. What happens in the most of his novels, the hero or heroines are from working class, and they become the victim of fate, destiny, whether it is Jude the Obscure, The Tales of the Urban Village, The Mayor of Casterbridge. These are the famous novels which deals with this theme. You can see the picture of Hardy in the next slide. Yes, this is a picture of Hardy, who is one of the important figure of this period. As I told you, he began his career as a novelist, and he found very difficult to publish his earlier novels, that is The Poor Man and A Lady. Then you have the first published novel, that is, the title is important, Desperate Remedies, which was published in 1871. In fact, he was one of the writers who wrote against the tradition where you have focus on reality. Most of the writers like Dickens, they shows the problems, evils of the society in their novels. But here he wrote against this tradition of realistic novels, and he was, you can say, criticized for the truth which he presented in his novels. His focus was more on declining rural society under the greenwood tree. That is a title which is taken from As You Like It. In fact, there is a song in As You Like It. So this is a question which is asked in the exam, that the title of Under the Greenwood Tree is taken from which dramatist, that is William Shakespeare, and you have the play that is As You Like It. Again, in tradition of Dickens, you will find the subtitles of the novel. Here, the subtitle of novel is A Rural Painting of the Dutch School. And you have another novel, title is important, A Pair of Blue Eyes, that is published in 1873. It talks about the love story of Dickens' personal life. This is the first novel, and the question is asked on this subject particularly, in which is the first novel in which Hardy introduced Wessex, the setting of Wessex, that is far from the madding crowd. Remember that you have sometimes chronological order is asked, and these are the important titles for a chronological order. 1874, and the title is taken from uh, Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard. This is also asked in your exam. Then you have another work, that is The Return of Native, a very important novel. Then you have The Mayor of Casterbridge, The Life and Death of a Man of a Character. And here the hero is Michael Hanchard. Generally, in character matching A and B, you have sometimes the novels of Hardy and the characters are mentioned. The Woodlander, Tales of the Urban Village, and again it carries a subtitle that is a Pure Woman. Now let us talk about Far from Madding Crowd, that is considered as the first successful novel of Dickens. This is a novel which is focused on one character, that is Gabriel O, who is a farmer and shepherd. And he is honest, but you know that generally honest people are facing so many problems in their life. So here you have particularly one beautiful heroine whose name is Bathsheba Everton. And what happens that Gabriel Oak was in love with this lady, but she rejected the proposal of Gabriel Oak and marries Frank Toy. But later on, she realized that Gabriel was the good choice for her. That is described in this novel. The title is Far from the Madding Crowd. Important thing is that Wessex is the setting of this novel, and first time you have the mention of Wessex. Later on, you have so many novels where you have Wessex setting of the novels of Hardy. Then you have another thing is that the title is taken from Thomas Gray elegy written on a country churchyard. One of the classic of this period, that is Tales of the Urban Village, which is published in 1891. The subtitle is very, you can say, critical. That is The Pure Woman. You have a hero. Uh, you have two heroes, and They are actually, you can say, the hero, but the focus is on the heroine, that is Teresa S. Durber Field, who is a uneducated daughter of uneducated peasants, farmers, and in order to help her family, she work in the field. And what happens that she was seduced, she was raped by the land owner, and she becomes pregnant. What happens? There is a character called Alec, that is the villain, and there is a character, she bears a son whom she names Sorrow, who later on dies very soon in the novel. But the character is asked that what is the name of son of Tess, that is Sorrow. Then you have uh, what happens that Tess meets Angel Clare. She forgets about all these things, what Alec had done to her, and Angel you can say, falls in love with uh, Tess. Now, on the wedding night, Angel asks forgiveness for a past sexual indiscretion of his own, and that is the one of the turning point in this novel, where Tess also decided to make confession about her past. But once she confessed, the attitude of Angel is completely changed. And that is how you can say the character of Tess suffers a lot. And later on, Tess decides to leave the house, and you have can say that a very tragic end in the novel, where Angel and Tess died at the end. And in fact, you can say that the villain character, whose name is particularly જે છે એલેક, એ જે તમારી જોડે છે એનું મર્ડર છે એ ટેસ કરી દે છે. During the course of the novel, Tess' father also dies, and then what happens later on? Angel Clare realized that he made a mistake. He returns to England to find Tess and wanted to renew their love story. But somehow Tess is caught by the police, and જે છે એ સજા જે છે એને મળે છે. પર્ટિક્યુલરલી જે છે તમારી જોડે અહીંયા હાર્ડી જે છે એની નોવેલની લાસ્ટ લાઈન છે એ તમને નીટની એક્ઝામમાં પૂછાય છે. Justice was done, and the president and or president of the immortal in the Asylum phase had ended his sport with Tess. You can find the co-op King Lear's line that life is like particularly uh, for God. This is taking the lives of the people is a game. So here he says, ironically, justice was done, and the president of the immortals, means God, had ended his sport with Tess. One of the beautiful novel, which is considered as a classic of this period. You have a movie also. This is one of the scene of the movie, and you can say you have another novel, Jude the Obscure, which was published and generally said the last novel of Hardy, because this novel's copy was burned by Oxford University student because in this novel, Hardy presented uh, sexuality and you have the marriage between cousins is presented in the novel called Jude the Obscure. That is why later on in his career, he stopped writing fiction and started to focus on poetry, where he wrote some collection of poems like basic poems, satire of circumstances. Basic poems is important collection, 1898. And with Jude the Obscure, you can say you have the end of Victorian period. In fact, there are some writers who are still writing, and you will find the echo of Victorian uh, characteristics in some of the works. But Hardy is considered as one of the last figure of this period. You can say in his poetry also, you have modernist theme, and in fact, Hardy can be considered as the first modern poet because he explores a fatalistic outlook against the dark, rugged landscape of his native place, that is Dorset. You know that in this period, you have already this question that whether there is God or not. Eh, so he rejects the Victorian belief in benevolent God. And his poetry is also like his novels, where you can say that elements of sadness are found. And again, you can say that his poems is an attack on the society, and the focus is on the condition of human lives, the working class. There are some poems from his Wessex and the collection called Circumstances. One of the poem is The Darkling Hush, and the original title was By the Century's Deathbed. Then The Broken Appointment, another important title. The Minute Before Meeting, that is another important title. And as I have told you, he can be considered as one of the important novelists of this period. Now, let us focus on one of the important novels, that is Jude the Obscure. Now, Jude the Obscure is a novel which was published in 1895. Because the heroine, that is Jude, and you have particularly the hero who is a character who belongs to the working class. Both Jude Fowley, a poor orphan, who wanted to marry particularly his cousin, and this was considered as a taboo in the society. So, first times you can say that someone has depicted the theme, that is, uh, you have the Jew who is the hero, and Arabella, that is the female protagonist of the novel. And in fact, they have so many children that they cannot provide the proper food to these children. And in fact, some of the children dies because of the lack of food. And in fact, one of the character, that is the children, that is one of the child, who says that we, means he's talking about all the children, that we are dying because we are too many, and we are suffering because of this thing, that we are too many. So the focus is on particularly actually Arabella જે છે એની જોડે પહેલા મેરેજ થયેલા છે જ્યુથના. Then you have another important character that is Shu, S-U-E. She also married to one of the person and later she is widow. Later on you have the marriage between Jude and Shu, which is one of the important uh, as well as this is a topic which created a problem for Hardy in a Victorian society because for the first time someone is talking about sex in very you can say open manner. You know that you are going to study D.H. Lawrence in the modern period who also treated sex in his most important novels like Sense and Lovers, Lady Chatterley's Lover, then White Peacock. These are the important novels which deals with the theme of sexuality and he treats in a frank manner. But remember that in this period you have already the theory of Sigmund Freud and in modern time, some of the books of Freud were already published. So people are aware about this concept of ego and super ego. But in Victorian period, this was one of the controversial uh, issue that was raised by Hardy. And that is why his novel's copy, Zoology Obscure, was burnt by some of the students at the gate of Oxford University. And this led to, you can say, depression in the life of Harvey. And from that point, he stopped writing fiction novels and he later turned to poetry. Of course, he is famous for his novels and his bold treatment of subjects which were not praised by other writers like Charles Dickens, Bronte sisters, or you can say William Maurice Thackeray. So one of the important names whose career is, you can say, shot down because of his revolt against his frank treatment of sexuality and other things that he is one of the pessimistic writer who asks so many questions to the God. He is completely opposite to, you can say, Robert Browning. They say he is a poet of hope, but on the other side, he is a poet of pessimism, novelist of pessimism. So this is all about Hardy. Now you have Henry James, who is a famous novelist. In fact, he was born in America, New York. And his brother, you might have heard the name of William James, who wrote a book called The Principles of Psychology, where he used this phrase stream of consciousness. So, Henry James is a brother of William James. He was born in 1843 in New York and later on settled down in England. And you know that he is one of the person who also wrote in this technique called stream of consciousness. In the modern period, you have Virginia Woolf, you have James Joy, who are particularly very famous name, Dorothy Richardson, who are writing in this uh, stream of consciousness technique. He settled down in England in 1876 And in fact, this is one of the important thing because in one of the critical books, I.A. Richards, he wrote a book called the Great Tradition. Sorry, F.R. Lewis is the writer of Great Tradition, if I'm not wrong. We will talk about that when we will discuss critical text. So, in the Great Tradition, Henry James is considered as one of the uh, four novelists who are considered best novelist of the age, where you have Jane Austen, George Eliot, D.H. Lawrence, and Henry James. If, for example, if he did not immigrate to England in 1876, there are possibilities that he might not be considered as one of the greatest novelists. Uh, this is a picture of Henry James. You have one of the particularly work that is the Atlantic Monthly, જે છે એમની novels એ આ મેગેઝિનમાં સૌથી વધારે પબ્લિશ થઈ છે જે મંથમાં એકવાર આવતું હતું. And in fact, he wrote so many essays and theater reviews. He is famous for his theater reviews. And his style is later known as impressionistic style. And you know that he was born in America. That is why many works depicted American in Europe. Well, let us talk about his important work. And when we are talking about his important work, you have one novel that is Roderick Hudson. The title is very important. In fact, it is asked in the exam. Then the American is repeatedly asked in the exam because this is one of the famous novel written by a person who was American earlier and settled down in England. This was published after 1 year once he settled in England. And the main character is Christopher Newman, who is actually an American and traveling in Europe. Then he wrote another book that is also famous, The Europeans. And one of the famous novel which is written in the technique of stream of consciousness, that is The Portrait of a Lady, which was published in 1881. Very famous novel. Daisy Miller is also one of the story of one of the American girl who was very beautiful, whose name is Daisy Miller. Then, as I've told you, generally this is a novel which is considered as the masterpiece of Henry James. That is the portrait of a lady, where you have the girl Isabel Archer. The character is also asked in the exam. So what happens that uh, she gets so much money from her uncle. એ જે છે આ પોર્ટ્રેટ ઓફ લેડીમાં જે છે બતાવવામાં આવેલું છે. And what happens, he spent the money in so many, you can say, things which are not important for the life. And later on, she realized the value of money and values of her independence. Another work in the, you can say, the golden ball that is generally asked in the GSET exam. Wings of a Dove, also one of the famous novel, but the golden ball is one of the important title. You have to remember only the title like the outcry, the Italian awards, the golden ball. but this is generally asked in the exam, that is the golden ball. Then you have, of course, the American and the portrait of a lady. Remember the publication of year of portrait of lady, that is 1881. Then you have one ghost novella, that is Turn of the Screw, and another novel that is also the title is asked, that is Ambassadors, where this is not novel, dark comedy, and you have particularly Lambert Schroeder, who is the third person narrative, means the narrator, and this is an autobiographical novel because Henry James also worked as a journalist. Here you have this character who was an editor. So remember this title also, The Ambassadors. Then he wrote some autobiographies. One is A Small Boy and Others, Notes of a Son and Brother, The Middle Years. Notes of a Son and Brother, that is important title. And you can see that most of the novels are published. Uh, the Portrait of Lady and the Americans, these are published in Victorian age. Otherwise, you can find all the other novels are published in modern age, in the beginning of modern age, or you can say in the first 2 decades of modern age. He wrote one of the critical texts, which is very important, that is the art of fiction, where he focuses on how to write a novel. So the focus is on particularly consciousness and stream of consciousness. That is a term which was coined by his brother William James in Principle of Psychology. તો તમને આ પ્રશ્ન પૂછાયેલો છે કે આ ટર્મ છે એ કોને કોઈન કરેલી છે? બુકનું નામ પણ પૂછાયેલું છે, પ્રિન્સિપલ ઓફ સાયકોલોજી. અને ઇનફેક્ટ ધ ફોકસ ઇઝ, as the title suggests, the art of fiction, તો ફિક્શન કઈ રીતે લખવું તેના ઉપર જે છે ફોકસ કરવામાં આવ્યું છે. Another work, that is the art of novel. Okay, earlier you have the art of fiction. You have the difference between these two terms, that is novel and fiction. You are going to study one of the uh, texts, that is the aspects of novel. The title is very famous book by Ian Foster, where you have the focus is on novels. So remember these titles, two titles, The Art of Fiction and The Art of Novel, written by Henry James. Then some prose writer, one of the important writer is Matthew Arnold. You have already we have already seen the biographical detail. He was born in 1822. He died in 1888. Father of son of Thomas Arnold, the famous headmaster of Rugby School. In fact, there is a elegy written on his father, Rugby Chapel. He also became the inspector of school, and later on he married Frances Lucy Whiteley. Now Arnold is famous for his books called uh, Culture and Anarchy, and some were, you can see the photo of Arnold. Uh, you have particularly can say that he was a polymath. Polymath is a person who has the knowledge of so many subjects. Later on, you know that he became a professor of poetry at Oxford University, but his main focus was, you can say, on cultural theories. In fact, he wrote in particularly his prose are very famous. He is famous for his poem called Flower Beach. But The elegies and poems are not very, you can say, appealing, but his critical works, that is generally collection of essays, are very famous. One is essay in criticism. Earlier we have not studied this criticism. You have essay on criticism by Alexander Pope, which was published in 1711. Now this is essay in criticism, which we are going to study in criticism, but just remember some important detail that it was published in 1865, where you have uh, some essays. Later on, this book is published posthumously in 1888. The subject, you have two famous essays: Study of Poetry, the Function of Criticism at the Present Time. In fact, study of poetry is generally prescribed in the syllabus, where he talks about the touchstone method. Then he talked about the poet should have high truth and high seriousness. He has given the example of Shakespeare, Milton, Goethe, Wordsworth. These are the greatest writers, according to him. He criticized Chaucer because there is no seriousness in the writing of Chaucer. These are the particularly ideas which we are going to talk in criticism. Then you have the function of criticism at the present time. In fact, the function of criticism is also an essay by T.S. Eliot. Here, the focus is on how critics should judge the work. One of the important texts that is a part of cultural study, that is culture and anarchy. And generally, this text is prescribed in the syllabus when you are studying Victorian novels and prose. And from the critical point of view, it is one of the important texts in a cultural study. This is considered as the first important text in the theory of cultural study. In fact, this is also a series of periodical essays published in Cornhill magazine, published in 1867 and 1868. He talks about, in the first chapter, he talks about culture. He says that culture is a study of perfection. Then he says that the pursuit of total perfection by means of getting to know on that matters which most concerns us, the best which has been thought and said in the world. This is the definition of culture. And he talked about the important writers, where he talks about Carlye, Ruskin, Thoreau. These are the important writers of his period. As I told you, according to him, culture is the study of perfection. You have chapter 1, Sweetness and Light. The title is taken from Jonathan Swift's book. The phrase is taken from Allegory of a Bee and Spider. So this is the title of chapter 1. In fact, there are 6 chapters which we are going to discuss when we are going to study these texts as a cultural part of a cultural study. So just remember the publication year, that is 1868. Chapter 3, which talks about three classes: barbarians, Philistines, and populace, which is also, you can say, important. Then you have chapter 4, where you have Hebraism and Hellenism, which what is the meaning of Hebraism and Hellenism, that is also asked in the exam. Hellenism is to see things as they are. Helen means, you know, that Helen is one of the beautiful characters in હોમર્સ ઇલિયાડ એન્ડ ઓડિસી. તો હેલેન જે છે એ પર્ટિક્યુલરલી બ્યુટી જે છે એ પ્રેઝન્ટ કરે છે. હેબ્રાઇઝમ ઇઝ strict, you can say strictness of conciseness, conduct and obedience. Hebraism, Hebrew, that is the language of Jews, which symbolize the knowledge. તો એની જે છે ચર્ચા એમને કરી છે. ઇનફેક્ટ 6 ચેપ્ટર છે, એમાં અલગ અલગ વિષય ઉપર એમને પ્રશ્નો ઉઠાવ્યા છે. Then you have some religious work where you have Saint Paul and Protestantism, literature and dogma. This is a title which is generally asked in GSET exam. God and the Bible, last essay on church and religion. As I told you that he was very religious person. That is why you have some works which talks about this theme of Bible. And in fact, he wrote one of the essay, in particularly taken inspiration from Johnson's work, that is the work, the most eminent poets of English, which talks about 52 poets. But out of these 52 poets, Johnson picked, Dr. Arnold picked only 6 poets, including Milton, Dryden, Pope, Swift, then Joseph Addison and Thomas Gray. તો એમને જે છે 6 eminent poets of English literature એવા ટાઇટલ સાથે એક એસે લખ્યો છે, જેમાં આ 6 રાઇટરની વાત કરી છે જે નેટમાં તમને પૂછાયેલું છે. અગેન જ્હોન મિલ્ટન, પછી તમારી જોડે જે છે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી મિલ્ટન, પછી ડ્રાયડન, Alexander Pope, Joseph Addison. So then you have this name Thomas Gray. બરાબર. અને આ જે રાઇટર્સ છે એમને 52 પોઈન્ટમાંથી બેસ્ટ કીધા છે. ઓકે, તો એ જે છે આપણે ક્રિટિકલ વર્કમાં એક વખત ટાઇટલ તો જોઈશું, બટ જસ્ટ રિમેમ્બર કે આ જે છે એ આર્નોલ્ડનો એક વર્ક છે. આના પછી તમારી જોડે જે છે વિક્ટોરિયન એજમાં એક મહત્વનું નામ છે, એનું નામ છે થોમસ બેબિંગ્ટન મેક્યુલે. One of the person which is generally sometimes the people says that he is the person who is responsible for ruining the Indian education system, but people don't know that he was one of the scholar, one of the historian, best historian of England, who read a lot, and you have some books which is very famous. That is one of the things is that history of England. Then he wrote some essays on Bunyan, Addison, Bacon, Johnson, Goldsmith, Byron, and he is a person who particularly wrote a book called A Minute on Education, where he particularly, you can say, created a draft on how to, on the subject, that is how to bring reforms in Indian education system, and how to introduce English in Indian education system. But generally, we means Indians, when we talk about this person, we talked about him in a negative manner, but that is not a case. We will talk about him when we will see the Indian literature. એ વખતે આપણે એમની ચર્ચા કરીશું કે he is one of the you can say father of Indian English literature, or you can say directly or indirectly a person who is responsible for bringing in the English education in India. History of England, that is one of the famous texts. He is also one of the uh, wonderful poets of this period, but he is famous for, you can say, his historical text because primarily he was a historian. Then you have Thomas Carlyle, who was born in 1795, died in 1881. A person who is famous for the criticism of utilitarian philosophy and who was against the Industrial Revolution in the Victorian period. He was highly influenced by German literature and he translated one of the works of one of the Goethe, that is Meister's Apprenticeship. Then he wrote a book called The Life of Schiller, who is one of the important names in German literature, and this is a book which is written in Germanic language. When you study Emerson essay, that is the American scholar, you frequently get this name, that is Thomas Carlyle, because he was very close friend of Emerson. Then uh, he is a person who particularly wrote a book called The French Revolution. This is the picture of this man, Thomas Carlyle. Signs of Time, that is important title only. Sartor Resource. This is repeatedly asked in the exam. The publication year is 1836, which talks about the philosophy of clothes. કપડાની જે ફિલોસોફી છે એના વિશે વાત કરે છે. તમને આ રીતે પ્રશ્ન પૂછ્યો છે કે which is the important text which talks about the philosophy of clothes. Then you have the French Revolution, which was published in 1837 and it includes 3 volumes. You cannot say that it is a completely historical document, but uh, one of the important texts in order to understand the both sides of French Revolution. He completed draft, then accidentally this draft was burnt by G.S. Mill's maid. Then it is said that he rewritten this draft of the French Revolution again. Another text, that is Chartism, which is published in 1840. And here you can say that it is a series of debates which turned into a book. And here this question, condition of England question, which we have already discussed when we have started the Victorian age. So he is the first person who introduced this phrase called condition of England question. Remember this book name called Chartism and this phrase condition of England question. Then Shelter Resorts, it means Taylor DePage, and this is a particularly novel which is based on one of the German philosopher who was the author of Clothes, Their Origin and Influence. This is the name of the German philosopher. Like Tephu, this is German name, so it is very difficult to pronounce. Just remember, see the title of the writer. But you have this question, that is that the book is based on clothes, or you can say philosophy of clothes. Then you have some works where this is very important, which is a series of lectures which includes 6 lectures. This is also asked in the exam. On heroes, hero worship and the heroic in history. જે છે 6 લેક્ચર છે એમાં પર્ટિક્યુલરલી અમે હીરો ઓફ ડિવિનિટી જે છે એમાં ઓડિન, પ્રોફેટમાં મોહમ્મદ છે એમને બતાવ્યા છે, પોએટમાં બે નામ છે દાંતે એન્ડ શેક્સપિયર, પ્રિસ્ટમાં લુથર અને નોક્સ, મેન ઓફ લેટરમાં જોન્સન, રૂસો, બર્ન્સ, કિંગમાં છે ક્રોમવેલ અને નેપોલિયન. આમાંથી તમારી જોડે બે મહત્વના નામ છે. એક તો પોએટમાં દાંતે અને શેક્સપિયર એ નેટમાં પૂછાયેલા છે કે on heroes and hero worship in heroic history, which are the two important poets mentioned as a heroes of poet. So Dante and Shakespeare and man of letters. પોએટમાં જે છે મેન ઓફ લેટર્સ મતલબ કે જે લોકો પર્ટિક્યુલરલી લખે છે એમાં એક તો ડૉક્ટર જોન્સનનું નામ છે, રૂસો વન ઓફ ધ ફિલોસોફર ઓફ ફ્રેન્ચ રિવોલ્યુશન એન્ડ રોબર્ટ બર્ન્સ. આ જે છે તમારે યાદ રાખવાનું છે, બાકી યાદ નહીં રહેતો વાંધો નથી. બીજું છે 6 લેક્ચર છે તમને જીસેટ નેટમાં પૂછાઈ ચૂકેલું છે. Another important book which is a collection of 4 books, and that is the criticism of industrialist England. The title of the book is Past and Present. Poem, The Ancient Monk, The Modern Worker and Horoscope. These are 4 books which are, you can say, makes the collection called Past and Present, which was published in 1843. Then you have one particularly essay, Shooting Niagara and After. This is also asked in the exam. And this was written against the Great Reform Act of 1867. And this was also published in 1867. Later Day Pamphlet, that is particularly a collection of essays where you have some political, religious, and social problems are raised by the writer. Then you have John Ruskin, who is one of the important name in India also because of his book called Unto This Last. He was born in 1890 and died exactly in 1900. He was actually a professor of architecture. He was not a poet, but he was an architecture. And most of this is a picture of Ruskin, and most of his novels generally deal with theme of fine arts. He was in fact a professor of fine arts at the Oxford University. He was a critic of Darwinian theory, but he was a great fan of Darwin personally. His ideas of Darwin's ideas were rejected by him, but he never ignored the personality of Darwin and his knowledge. તમને જે છે નેટમાં અને જીસેટમાં વારંવાર એક ટર્મ પૂછાય છે, that is pathetic policy. Pathetic policy જે છે એ કે એમને બુક છે મોડર્ન પેઇન્ટરમાં, એમાં એમને શબ્દ જે છે એ કોઈન કરેલો છે, બરાબર. અને એમાં જે છે પર્ટિક્યુલરલી આ ટર્મનો મિનિંગ થાય છે ascription of human emotion to intimate objects and impersonal natural forces. એના માટે એમને શબ્દ યુઝ કર્યો છે પેથેટિક પોલિસી. ઇનફેક્ટ તમે જે છે એ પેથેટિક પોલિસી છે એ જે છે ટર્મ આગળ જતા એક નેગેટિવ કેપેબિલિટી શબ્દ આવશે જોન કિટ્સ દ્વારા અપાયેલો, તો એમાં પણ થોડી જે છે આવી જ વાત કરવામાં આવેલી છે. અને આ જે છે ક્રિટિકલ બુકમાં તમારી જોડે પેથેટિક પોલિસી જે છે એ ફ્રેશ ફરીથી આવશે, તો એ વખતે આપણે ડિટેલમાં ચર્ચા કરીશું. બટ ફક્ત અત્યારે જે છે તમારે જીસેટમાં અને નેટમાં વારંવાર પૂછે છે કે હુ કોઈન્ડ ધીસ ટર્મ કોલ્ડ પેથેટિક પોલિસી. Another thing is that he is famous for this book called Unto This Last, જેમાં 4 એસે છે, એ પણ પૂછાયેલું છે. ઇકોનોમિક જે છે ઇસ્યુ પર ફોકસ કરતું વર્ક છે, બહુ ફેમસ બુક છે. ગાંધીજી was inspired by this book and he wrote the book એ ટ્રાન્સલેટેડ બુક ઇન ગુજરાતી અને એનું ટાઇટલ છે સર્વોદય મીન્સ સબકા ભલા વેલફેર ફોર ઓલ જે છે એ ટાઇટલ છે. બીજું છે તમારી જોડે આમાં 4 એસે છે એ તમારે ધ્યાનમાં રાખવાનું છે. The title is taken from Bible into this class. પબ્લિકેશન યર છે એ પણ પૂછાયેલું છે. બીજા બધા જે એસેસ છે એ જનરલી ફાઇન આર્ટ્સ અને પોલિટિકલ ઇકોનોમી છે એને ડીલ કરતા છે, જેમ કે ફોર્સ ક્લેવિઝર, મોનેરા, ફુલવેરીસ, એના ખાલી ટાઇટલ યાદ રાખજો. પણ ટુ ધીસ લાસ્ટ છે એ વારંવાર પૂછાયેલું, પેથેટિક પોલિસી છે એ વારંવાર પૂછાયેલું છે. બીજા જે વર્ક છે સેવન લેમ્પ્સ ઓફ આર્કિટેક્ચર, જે આર્કિટેક્ચરની થીમ સાથે ફોકસ કરે છે. મોડર્ન પેઇન્ટર્સ છે એ તમારા માટે ફેમસ છે કેમ કે અમુક પેથેટિક પોલિસીનો વાત થયેલી છે. બીજું છે તમારી જોડે સ્ટોન ઓફ વેનિસ, વેર હી ઇઝ ફોકસિસ ઓન વેનેશિયન આર્ટ એન્ડ આર્કિટેક્ચર. તો એ જે છે મહત્વની થીમ છે. Then you have one work that is written in Latin. Preterita means of past things, not important from net exam point of view. Then you have Lytton's treachery. એક બ્લૂમ્સબરી ગ્રુપના જે છે મહત્વનું નામ છે. આપણી જોડે જ્યારે મોડર્ન એજ હવે ચાલુ થશે તો તમારી જોડે જે છે એ પર્ટિક્યુલરલી ક્રિટિક જે છે એમાં એક ગ્રુપ આવે છે, નોટ ક્રિટિક બટ એક ગ્રુપ છે બ્લૂમ્સબરી ગ્રુપ, એમાંનું એક મહત્વનું ફિગર છે, મેમ્બર છે. બાકી રાઇટર ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ નથી પણ જસ્ટ કે મેમ્બર તરીકે બ્લૂમ્સબરી ગ્રુપના તરીકે એ ધ્યાનમાં રાખવાનું છે. ધીસ ઇઝ અ પિક્ચર ઓફ જે છે રાઇટર લિટન સ્ટ્રેચરી. એમના બે વર્ક છે, એમાંથી એક તમારી જોડે એમિનન્ટ વિક્ટોરિયન જે છે એક ટાઇટલ છે જેનું આખું ટાઇટલ છે કાર્ડિનલ મેની ફ્લોરેન્સ નાઇટેંગલ ડૉક્ટર આર્નોલ્ડ જનરલ ગોર્ડન. આ જે આખું ટાઇટલ છે બટ તમારે પોતે એમિનન્ટ વિક્ટોરિયન છે એ યાદ રાખવાનું છે. બીજું છે એમને અમુક જે છે આમ રાઇટર્સ કીધા એમની જે છે બાયોગ્રાફી લખી છે, એ શોર્ટમાં જે છે બાયોગ્રાફીનું કલેક્શન છે એનું ટાઇટલ આપ્યું છે અને બાયોગ્રાફીમાં સૌથી મહત્વનું નામ છે ડૉક્ટર આર્નોલ્ડ, બરાબર, અને બીજું નામ છે ફ્લોરેન્સ નાઇટેંગેલ. તો અહીંયા જે છે આપણે આ વિક્ટોરિયન એજનું જે છે ડિસ્કશન એ પૂરું કરીએ છીએ. હવે તમારી જોડે હાલો